Panel, this is a panel I put together. It's the career path of a network professional. One of my friends here and a veteran, longtime NANOGer hit me up after the last NANOG conference and said, you know, I've been hit up by a lot of the junior staff, especially the students, and they're asking me, how do I get into networking? How do I get into engineering operations? How do I get to your job? How did you get to your job? And as a lot of us know, those that have been in the industry for 15, 20 years, there's no class that we took to be a network engineer. There's no job that we maybe applied for, our first job, that actually got us to where we were. So inspired by this friend of mine, I didn't ask if he wanted to be mentioned, so I'm sorry I'm not giving him credit. But inspired by the friend of mine, I figured, you know what, let me actually look through the roster of our attendees here from Washington, D.C., and let me find some seasoned veterans that I know that are familiar to the crowd, and maybe we'll get a little insight into how they got where they got. So, I forgot my clicker, there we go. So what I did was I asked them to, first of all I asked them to give us a rundown of what it is they're doing now, what their current responsibilities are, and what is their relevant education or interesting education, steps they may have taken to actually get where they are. And I posed these 3 questions to the panelists and asked each of them to think of one answer. So as they're going to give their basic background, they're going to give you an answer of one of these questions. So I asked them to give us a pivotal moment in their career path which led to their current job. So it may have been some amazing opportunity they took, or some risk they took, or something they saw posted and they applied for. And I also asked them, this is a kind of a really sensitive question, was what qualifications or experience are you looking for in a candidate now, which had the tables been turned, you would not have been able to satisfy early in your own career? So maybe slightly hypocritical question, but what are you asking for now that you didn't have yet, you're wildly successful? Or choose a significant mentorship experience that either you had that helped get you where you are, or share a significant mentorship experience where you actually are the mentor, you have been the mentor, and you've helped somebody progress through the path. So hopefully most of these faces will be familiar to you. So we have, I'm not in sequence here, sorry, but we have Dave Siegel, we have Jared, we have Anna, we have Jason, Andree, Kobi, and Kat. So let's see whose first slide we have is Andree. Go ahead, take it away.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I'll introduce myself. So my name is Andree Toonk. My current role is Manager of Network Engineering at OpenDNS, now part of Cisco, I guess, since about 1.5 years. So my responsibility are kind of, I guess, what you expect, anything for making sure that the OpenDNS infrastructure is up and running, development, operations, and all the fun stuff that comes with that. So how did I get to where I am today? Well, I was born and raised in the Netherlands, so as a typical Dutch boy, I used to sell cheese, which has nothing to do with networking. I actually really liked it. And my smaller brother, he actually worked for a help desk at that point, and I didn't really want to join him, but then he told me how much money he was making there, and as compared to selling cheese, there was a lot more. So he gave me a crash course, and sort of I joined him. So from there on, I got a sort of intern thing as a sysadmin at a company that other ISPs outsourced their sysadmin work to. So lots of maintaining mail servers, web servers, proxy, LDAP, all that kind of stuff. This is also, by the way, where I learned my VI skills, which is one of the things I'm looking for in Canada. It's just joking. Then I did another internship. So I used to work there for a few years just as sort of a part-time role while I was a student. And then in the final year of, I guess, my education, I did a 6-month internship at the Amsterdam Internet Exchange. Really great environment, great people, and I learned a lot there. Obviously, one of the things I learned is how the internet really works. Up until that point, I always thought you just set your default gateway to your ISP and I don't know, they take care of it. But there I kind of realized that at some point someone has to hand it off to other people. I also learned a lot of IPv6 there. That was part of my assignment. So eventually I graduated, ended up at a company called Sarah in the Netherlands, where I started working in the high performance network group, as they called it. Responsible for the sort of network engineering group, or on the NOC of SurfNet, which is kind of the Internet 2 here in the US, but then in the Netherlands. Learned a lot about big routers and back in the days, I guess GSRs and Avicii routers. Some of you might have worked on that. And then Juniper and lots of Nortel optical stuff as well. So eventually I moved to Canada and started working at BCNet, sort of a similar research and education network. I moved because my girlfriend lived there, and I moved alone. I didn't have any friends there yet, so I had a lot of time on my hands. And while my girlfriend was going to school at night, I would start this project called bgpmon.net. So I know many of you use that, and I think that was a bit of a pivotal moment because I started to learn a lot of you people, get to know you, working on weird issues. So that was really good, and sort of start working on my kind of personal network, I guess. That's also how I got my other job, or my job I have now, as I started as a network engineer at OpenDNS. I was the only network engineer back then. It was very chaotic. It was a lot of fun, really exciting, but also very stressful. And now we have a big team of much smarter people than myself that help us with that. So we'll see how it goes. If this networking thing doesn't work out, I'll just go back into selling cheese, I guess. And then sort of to the question I guess you posed, what are the qualities I'm looking for in candidates? I am hiring. And one of the things that I'm looking for, and I wish I had earlier on, is people with coding experience or some kind of automation experience. So I see lots of good resumes come by, but one of the things I'm really looking for, and which is often lacking, is some kind of automation skill. So as soon as I see the word Python, you probably have my attention. So I guess that would be my advice.
Excellent. All right, thank you. Okay, Anna, take it away.
All right. Hi, everybody. Anna Claiborne. My current role is at Packet Fabric, where I'm a co-founder and the SVP of software engineering. So it being a startup, I wear many hats. So not only do I look out over engineering, but I also look out over all product development and product management activities. So how I got started in this space is a couple different things. I got really lucky. My dad had a best friend who was an IT manager at a bank, and when I was 14, he said, "Hey, you like playing computer games? You know computers, you want to come work for us?" And I said, "Sure." And I started out copying Windows 3.11 disks for them, and I ended up managing and helping design and deploy all the ISDN, frame relay, T1 circuits across the entire bank. Because I had the initiative and I did it. And during college, actually, I went and I got a degree in BS in genetics because that was always my passion. And I thought what I was going to do was I was going to go work for Schiller, and I was going to work on this new technique because when I was in college, it was the heyday of like a lot of new things coming to genetics, especially if you had any skill with computers. And there was this whole shotgun DNA processing that was revolutionizing the way that DNA was processed. And I thought, hey, I'm going to go work on that. So probably the biggest pivotal moment in my career was, I had my BS done. I almost had a minor in computer science. I took, I think, what was one of the first bioinformatics classes ever, and I was the person in class that aced it because it was all in Perl, and it all was writing genetic type algorithms, so I loved it. So I called Schiller, to apply for a job, and I talked to one of the HR people there. And they said, "Well, that's great. It sounds like you're on a really good path. After you get your PhD, come talk to us. Otherwise, we'll give you a job pipetting crap in the lab." And I was like, "Oh, this isn't happening." So that led me to go start Prolexic Technologies, which was a DDoS mitigation company, just because I wanted to do something. I love doing new things, so that was something. There was no DDoS mitigation that existed. I barely knew what DDoS was, and I thought, that sounds awesome. I want to do that. And so while I was there, I ended up modifying like core C code for Squid. I ended up automating things like OSPF path weight, and like distribution of network traffic, all the DNS systems, all the control systems for the network. Automating blacklists to routers and developing, a lot of fun code to stop DDoS attacks as well as manage the network. And after that was kind of an interesting point because I ended up, back in the day, having sort of this weird mismatch of like software skills and network skills because I wasn't really a network engineer and most software stuff bored me. So I was actually a kind of a weird spot where I didn't know what to do with my career. And a lot of people I interviewed for network jobs, and they're like, "Well, you're not really fully qualified for this." And I interviewed for software jobs, and they were just boring. And Terramark ended up hiring me, the CTO there, who's probably one of my biggest role models, because he recognized that I did have a unique skill set, and I actually got to apply that to a lot of different really cool security stuff there, like running really interesting penetration tests and working on a lot of special projects where I actually had to engineer solutions, especially around like mergers and acquisitions type work. And so he was the one who really made me realize that, you know, knowing networks and knowing security and knowing software is, you know, it was something. So I ended up joining, you know, since I do like the cutting edge stuff, I ended up joining a startup. Again, 6Connect, that was doing automation around IP, DNS, resource management, orchestration, because, you know, everybody loves using spreadsheets for all that sort of stuff. And I thought, hey, there has to be a better way. So that was one of the things we were working on. And then now I'm on to my current startup, which is Packet Fabric, and it's something that we'd actually wanted to start years and years and years ago. And the technology, in a lot of respects, just wasn't there yet, because we wanted to take all these great concepts from cloud computing and like mash them into networks, right? You know, we wanted to create the fully automated, you know, cloud computing of networks. So, you know, this is like, to me, this is the pinnacle of where automation and networks end up. And so my big thing is, you know, automation and, of course, software engineering. Like, if you need to know, I think automation is the future, and if there's one skill that you can develop to help yourself is knowing anything in programming. You know, any language will be a big help. And you know, if any of you want to come talk to me afterwards, whether you're early in your career or late, you know, I'm happy to share any knowledge I have with you as far as, you know, automation, or how to encourage vendors towards automation, or how to teach it to yourself. So, thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Jared, take it away.
Hi, I'm Jared Mauch. I work for NTT Communications in the Global IP Network. You know, my current responsibilities include all sorts of things: hardware testing, software testing, just any sort of research type of activities that we do, architecting things like the optical network, doing research into like the DDoS, IoT type of activities, and just kind of, you know, all around fix everything that I find that's kind of broken surrounding me. Because, you know, within any organization, there's always, you know, challenges you have to overcome. And I'm one of the connectors inside of the company that bridges between the different groups, which is, you know, similar to what Anna is talking about, is like a very odd role. So my history, you know, comes out of, you know, learning and playing with computers from a very young age. I was the kid in elementary school where when the librarian was out sick, had my name and classroom listed in the substitute teacher plans. Like, go find this kid and he'll help set up all the computers. You know, through all of these years of, you know, basically doing, you know, all the computer stuff that they had at the school, plus doing independent study stuff, all back in high school, you know, I went and I stumbled on this book, The Cuckoo's Egg, which I don't know if people have read this, but, you know, back in the early 90s, this was, you know, a really interesting book. It covered all of these technologies that I had, you know, in growing up on like a TI-99/4A and, you know, MS-DOS, like, had all of these advanced Unix and networking types of things. And from that basically spiraled, opening up this entire gateway into interconnected computers and networking and stuff. So I went and basically learned about Unix. I taught myself Unix on all these systems. I ended up on the board of directors of this not-for-profit that ran public access Unix system, and eventually ended up finding my way into CICnet, one of the regional ISP networks at the time. After doing, you know, Unix system and stuff there, they also were like, oh wait, hey, you kind of understand networking stuff too, and, you know, kind of went out and explored all sorts of different projects that went and interacted with, you know, the software and hardware and the networking and stuff like that. Ended up at a dial-up ISP back when dial was still like a really big thing. We grew from 20,000 subscribers to 250,000 subscribers. We went public and went and that was the highest the stock price ever was. back in those wonderful days. And then eventually I found my way into NTT, where I've been for quite a long time here, doing basically everything from coming in from the network operations perspective of being on call and responsible to that, to moving up into the architecture team, where I get to oversee all sorts of new technologies and think of new ways to do the type of internet stuff that we all depend upon today. I really want to also comment on Anna's thing about the skills we're looking for in people. You really need to have people who understand automation. Understand automation is a tool, not to drive people out of employment, but it's really to make the networks behave in the way that we expect them to. I joke around what I call, the biggest SDN controller is Notepad exe or VI. Everyone goes and cuts and pastes something into the buffer, and how that's cut and paste SDN. But what I found is our customers really expect a consistent service delivery every single time. And when you're cutting and pasting and you're forgetting to edit a little section, that's the type of thing that causes network disruption. And you want people who look for that type of consistency, and that's why I think we've been done really well as our network, is delivering that consistent service. So,
thank you so much, Jared. Kat, take it away.
Hi, I'm Kat Parsons. I'm an interconnection specialist with Microsoft. I currently work with companies that want to connect directly to Microsoft. My specialty is internet exchanges, because I love the community and the businesses that get a chance to connect there. I like to say that my career went backwards. In high school, I hated computers. I hated them. And it was mainly, I have these memories of staying up till 3 a.m. just trying to print my papers, because I couldn't troubleshoot computers. I didn't understand firmware and hardware and that whole interaction. So I did attend a liberal arts college. I was a comparative religion and Asian studies double major, meaning I didn't have a job when I graduated. So I ended up, while I was in college, making friends with a lot of people who were they were just starting a computer studies minor. And because I hated computers and wanted to change that, I did take an introduction to computer class, loved it, had a great professor who was very passionate about computer science and about getting more students into computer science. And he was a mentor in a way, but mostly it was I just met a lot of really cool people who were into computer science. So when I graduated without a job and worked at Starbucks and a New Age bookstore, a bunch of friends of mine were getting jobs in tech. If you had a pulse, you could go and work in a NOC at the time. So a bunch of my friends said, hey, come back to Boston and we can help you find a job. And I had a mentor, it was actually the husband of a professor at my college, who said, yeah, I'll help you with your resume. So he sat me down, helped me with my resume. My tech experience was this big, and helped me with the cover letter, and he helped me get my first job, second shift in a NOC at Genuity, or what was Genuity, used to be BBN Technologies. And everything else was on the job. So I did my certification, self-study, there was some training, and I knew I wasn't a software person. Programming to me just doesn't quite fit, but you get me onto a router, you get me onto a switch, and that's what clicks. It was the troubleshooting aspect of it that I loved. So from there, I worked for a couple of startups. I did do a short stint unemployed as a financial planner. That was always fun. Immediately went back into tech as an IT consultant. So I worked with small and medium-sized businesses. And then I spent 8 years at a children's hospital, which was great because I could really hone my skills. Racking, stacking, configuring, setting up a lot of the security stuff as well, and I loved it, but I missed the internet. Starting in a NOC, you get to see the relationships with all the different companies and the path, the trace route you're taking through the network. And I really loved that. I really missed sort of being in that space. So I ended up going to Akamai as a network engineer, and after that joined Microsoft. And with the questions that we've been asked, one of the things I highly recommend is, out of the 6 or 7 jobs I've had in my career, 5 of them were through contacts I made at my very first job. Something that's kind of overlooked in our space, is, yes, we all do computer networking. There's people networking. There's a real community here. And people will bring you into jobs when they shift because they know your skill set, or they want to work with you again. They know you're a team player, or you bring that specialization that they're looking for. So there's a great deal of people networking that you can do. And I can honestly say my position here at Microsoft is because of a NANOG. I was at a NANOG, and I was a network engineer, but I was hanging out with our peering people, and I was learning about the community and the different companies. And that's how my boss heard about me from Microsoft, and I was recruited. So there's a lot going on at the NANOGs in sessions and also out in the hallways when you're talking to people. Find out what company they're working at. Ask them what their job is. Do they enjoy it? How did they get into it? And LinkedIn is a great tool. You know, connect to people on LinkedIn and you can see who else they know at other companies. I've gotten 1 or 2 job offers that way, actually. So don't miss the people networking aspect while you're here.
Great.
Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. Okay, Jason, your turn.
Hi, my name is Jason Schiller, and I'm in Google Network Operations. And the way things work at Google is it's sharded into different teams, like Gmail is a team and Search is a team. And that team is responsible for a product. And there's a site reliability engineering team that picks up that product once it's mature and runs it and keeps it healthy and living. In the case of the network, what that means is the network site reliabilities do all the monitoring and all the break fix, and everything else is done in network operations. So that's everything from upgrading routers to building new POPs to redesigning the network to looking at enhancements of the network and workarounds for things that are broken or where it's performing poorly. I also do some number strategy for Alphabet and the various Google companies, which has led me to a large involvement with the ARIN number policy community, as well as holding an elected position with the number resource organization Number Council, which basically performs the role of shepherding global policy proposals through the 5 regions and up through IANA. So basically, I started my career in college. I went to the American University and I studied international relations, environmental science, and philosophy, dual degree, triple major. And at the time, I started working as a student in the student-run lab. The largest lab on campus was Anderson Computing Center. And the lab manager there was not very technical, but she was very good about having 1 or 2 lab assistants that really took the lab and ran it from a technical standpoint. And there seems to have been a legacy of this, a number of lab assistants over the years, with one replacing the next. And there was never any handoff. It was always the next person coming in just started fresh, just grabbed what was there, was very hungry and excited about figuring out what was going on and just making it work and work well. And that's really how I got my start with computers. It was a networked lab, Novell NetWare 4.0 with WordPerfect. The other big thing that happened to me was everyone was talking about their career path. My plan was to go to law school and do international environmental law. I wrote away to the Hague Academy of the World Court and said, I'd like to come study there, what are the requirements? And they wrote me back a very nice letter that said, get your law degree and your legal law master's, and then talk to us. So I quickly shifted gears and applied to the 5-year joint JDMA program where I could get my master's degree and a Juris Doctor degree while pursuing my undergrad, and I didn't get in. And then in the first semester of my senior year, I ended at that semester with mono and never actually applied to any grad schools. So come graduation, the lab manager says, do you have a resume? I said, yeah. She says, well, go run up to the network engineering department because they're looking to hire. And they interviewed a candidate who worked for me and they called for references. And I said, if you hire this person, you're nuts because the only reason they can copy a floppy disk is because I spent 3 hours teaching them how to do that. They said, well, we have to hire someone. And she said, well, let me send someone up. So I ran up there with my resume, I interviewed, and I started in the networking department at the American University. And I remember the day I started very clearly. I had a desk that was kind of off into the corner. It had the microwave and the refrigerator on it. And there was a pile of old dead computers And that was my desk. And I basically had to move everything off of it, and from the parts that were there, build a working computer. And I remember literally hanging over the back of the computer trying to get the network interface card to work, and the boss coming out and starting to have his weekly staff meeting. And that's how I started my career there. The other really big significant changing point in my career was the day that that manager left. And each of us that was on the team, it was a very small team, there were like 5 of us, we all had a role where we were going to be responsible for what the manager used to do. The network was really his baby, he built it, he loved it, he nurtured it, and he was leaving. And I remember walking into the data center and looking at the routers and going, where do all these fibers go? And after that, I became the expert of what the network topology was. And that has really served me well throughout my entire career. I left American University. I went to Georgetown University, where I did much of the same, both for the university and the medical center. It was interesting because they made a lot of different network design choices, and it became very clear to me how important it is to make good design choices. After that, I went to ManorCare, which was a healthcare organization, and I basically sat in the corporate headquarters and ran the WAN connections to 230 remote nursing facilities, and also worked with the AT&T implementation manager to bring up new locations as new facilities were coming online. I did that for 6 months, and then they got merged with another company that moved the corporate headquarters to Toledo, Ohio. So I applied at Sprint and UUNet, and started at UUNet in the high-speed networking department, which was fantastic. It was a great place to learn. A lot of people came up through the ranks through there. VJ was in high-speed install at the time that I started. He shortly went to network engineering, and then a few years later I followed, going to network engineering as well. And in high-speed install, we did everything from installing 56K leased lines all the way up to optically protected OC3s, setting up the customer's IP addresses, DNS, the BGP configuration if they needed it. And one day, someone handed me an order for a customer that had managed customer premise equipment, and the people that did the managed services really didn't know how to configure routers, so they basically threw it over the wall to me. And they had 2 routers at 2 different locations, connecting to 2 different locations on the UUNet backbone. And they were both OC3s, and they wanted to test failover to make sure that the BGP failed over correctly. And I had never configured iBGP before. So I configured iBGP between the 2 routers. I said, I hope this is the same as eBGP, and got it all up and running and did the failure testing, and everything was great, and they were very happy. And then the other thing I did was, being curious about looking beyond just the edge router. I really only made config changes to the edge router, but I did dive deeper into the network to try and figure out why there was a routing loop when one of my customers was broken, for example. So that curiosity led me to have a greater understanding of the network, and that really supported me moving to network engineering. And I was there for like total 13 years. It was a great place to learn. And now I'm at Google.
Thank you so much. Okay, Kobi.
Hi, I'm Kobi Hsu. My current role is not really relevant to networking. I'm doing work on big data and grid computing for a research group that does financial research. Also, standard disclaimer, I'm speaking for myself. I do not represent my employer in any way. The big narrative of my career is that I tend to go to work with people that I know and I've worked with before. And same thing happened with my previous role. A friend of mine desperately needed a network engineer, and I was like, I'm not going to move back to the Bay Area, but if I can work remotely, I'll do it. So as part of the NetApp staff at Groupon, there were 2 of us full-time engineers when I was there, which meant for almost 2 years I was either on call or secondary, which is not a way to live life. I really don't recommend it. But it was responsible for all the data centers that we had, the network inside the data center, network with the interconnects, and also saying no. It's very important to be able to say no. Starting out, absolutely no relevant education. I had no clue what I wanted to do. I ended up at UMD because it was free to apply, and I got in, and it was nearby. But again, the narrative of getting jobs where you know people, I had actually gotten a job at the library when I was a teenager. One of my friends at the library worked at the computer labs at University of Maryland, and there you end up. So I get a job at the computer lab at the University of Maryland. Working at universities is an amazing way to get yourself involved with technology. It's fairly low risk. There's a lot of change. You learn new things. You can talk to professors who are doing interesting things. I've made 2 loops through the university environment, and both times it was really rewarding. And you meet a lot of people, again. So after about a year, I left Maryland. Friends of mine were at Digex. I spent a little bit of time at Digex, but I was working in accounting, which was really, really not satisfying at all. And so I got a job at Surinet, which at the time was actually still also affiliated with the university, but very shortly BBN acquired 3 of the regionals and decided to stitch them together. Working with multiple networks at once is a fascinating way to learn how different engineers do things. Surinet was also special in that MCI had leased their services to be their frontline NOC. So as a 19-year-old, I got to see how essentially 3 large networks, actually 4 large networks, did things, which is not something that's going to happen again. I think probably the closest that you can get to that is working for a vendor, because when you're a vendor working with multiple people, you can see how different people approach things. We all think we're speaking English, but each organization and each network is its own special ecosystem. So yeah, I've made a lot of sort of sideways jumps in my career, and generally it's going to work with people I know, and they'll have a problem they need solved, and I'll say, hey, I'll do it, which can be kind of terrifying. It's important to listen to your gut, and I say listen rather than trust, because you have to listen carefully to your gut, because if your gut can be like, oh my God, this is terrifying, because if it's important to grow, to not actually know fully what you're going to be able to do. You have to be a little bit terrified and go, oh my God, I'm not sure if I can do this. On the other hand, it's also important if your gut is saying, oh my God, I'm terrified because these people are batshit crazy. That's the time to run away. So you have to get in tune with your gut to tell the difference between the 2 terrors. Terror because you're not sure whether you're qualified to do your job, just put your head down and do it. You'll learn. There may be some sinking going on, but people will usually throw a hand in and keep you from drowning. So yeah, which is, I ended up doing peering at AboveNet. We had, well, maybe I won't go into that. Anyway, it was a little messy. Like many things, just documenting what's going on and learning what you're doing. And I found that operations in general is, well, one, I enjoy it because I'm a little bit of an adrenaline junkie, but 2, it helps to just approach things methodically. And that really hasn't changed. The networks have changed, but technology has changed, but that hasn't changed much. It's like, what's broken? Let's step back, think about what's going on. So yeah, a little bit of wandering, but that's it.
Cool. Thank you so much. And rounding out our panel will be Dave.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. So my current job is product management. I'm not an engineer anymore, but part of my role is to make life hell for engineers, so I love it a lot. I won't go through all the responsibilities up there. We'll just move on to the next slide due to time. They call it a career path for a reason. I guess there's lots of different ways you can get to where you want to be. For me, mine really started in college, even though I didn't finish, and and at college there was a computer club there that had somehow managed to amass labs and labs of really ancient equipment, like, you know, because it was like 10 years old, so it was therefore ancient. VAX 11, 780s, 750s, and we got to dabble in that and learn how to administrate Unix systems, rebuild BSD 4.3 kernels, learn how to build VMS clusters out of 780s and microvax 2s and stuff like that. And I forgot to even put it up here, but that led to my first job at the U of A, which was a lab assistant. And as a lab assistant, I got to maintain about 500 PCs and some SGIs and various Unix workstations used for molecular modeling and stuff like that. And some of the friends that I had in the computer club and I were sitting around, and one of my friends was a lab assistant for the neurobio department and said, hey, they're bidding out their network. They're going to upgrade from ThinNet to 10BASE-T. And I was like, we could do that. So we formed a corporation. They decided they voted me to run it. I was 19 at the time. And about a year after that, I decided that school was officially interfering with my education, and I would rather make money than spend it. And that for me was really the foundation of my path. The next big break that I got, lucky break, was selling a piece of software that we had written to a company called Net99, who was a national backbone operator at the time, and I use the word loosely, for those of you that know. Sold them some software, and then I became their director of network engineering. And that was a really, really fun time to be in the internet, because it was right when we were transitioning off of the NSFnet over to the NAPs. And so, you know, Net99 was one of the first 3 companies to start peering at Pac-Bell NAP, for example. And I had a lot of really great mentors at that time. The NANOG community was really small. Back then, there were, you know, maybe 100 folks that really knew BGP, and you'd call up Tony Lee at Cisco and say, I've been beating my head over this problem for like all day. You got to help me figure out how to fix it. And he'd go, oh yeah, that's a bug. You know, give me 5 minutes, and he'd fix the bug, and he'd upload a new version of iOS to an FTP server, and then you deploy it like 10 minutes later. I mean, it was the Wild West back then. It was a lot of fun. I think those were some of the more formative time for me. And ultimately, I think I ended up back in product management because I love the mix of business and technical that comes with that. The ability to not just understand how the network is built and engineered, but also try and deal with the problem of how to make money off it. To me, that's a lot of fun. And so that's how I ended up where I am now. I think my advice to folks that are trying to figure out how to go early career and get started is, you know, first, you can't be afraid of putting yourself in a position where you don't know what to do in the job, right? You have to put yourself out on a limb. You've got to be confident in your own intelligence that you'll be able to learn what you need to on the job. You can't train for this industry. You have to teach yourself once you land in the role. So don't be afraid to do that and take a job that you don't have the knowledge for. You can learn it. And if you're willing to put in the time, like the first 5-10 years of my career, I was working, you know, 12+ hour days plus, you know, 8-hour day on the weekends, and I did that for years, and I imagine we all did. That's what it takes to kind of get your foothold in this industry and move up. So, yeah.
Excellent. Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much. As a reminder, we all love to network with other people, so you can find us in the hallways, during the breaks, lunches. We have a couple socials tonight and tomorrow, so please remember these faces. And if you have more questions, you want to chat, you want to throw your ideas around, get some advice, we're all very approachable. We love to speak to new people, meet new people. Thanks also for your patience. We ran just a few minutes over. I really appreciate it. We're now going to break for lunch, which is it up one? Up 2 levels for lunch. Right, so just follow the 3B, so I think it's up 1. Either way, follow the signs for lunch, and we'll all meet right back here at 1:30.